How many opportunities have you missed out on, or how much time have you wasted? How much life have you wasted by sitting and feeling sorry for yourself, or thinking you can't, or not trying something new because you don't believe in yourself, or you don't have the energy to do it? Well, today we're going to be talking about positive intelligence and taking control of your saboteurs, and how to unleash some extra energy in your life. My name is Corey Harlock. I'm the creator of Key Hire, and I'll be your host today. Welcome to the Key Hire Small Business Podcast. This is season 2, episode 10. We're ticking along here. We thank you for tuning in. If you like what you hear today, give us a like, give us a share, subscribe, and make sure if you're watching us on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, you can also check out the audio blogs that we release down the road. We have lots of those on there for you too on any of your major platforms. So without further ado, we're going to be talking to Jane Weddle today. She defines herself as a business life coach, and she utilizes the positive intelligence, or PQ, operating system to help business owners. She's got 30 years of coaching and org development, from small businesses to Fortune 500 companies, and she's worked in all kinds of different industries. And her core belief is mindset is the biggest obstacle to your success. She's also lucky enough to have had COVID twice, and she's just getting over her second bout now. I think she said she was on day 8, and she'll be joining us from Nebraska. So Jane, Matt, if we can bring Jane on.
Hi.
How are you doing, Jane? How did I do?
Good. You did awesome.
Did we get it?
It's actually my third time with COVID.
Oh, third. See, I didn't do. I was wrong. I got some of it wrong.
That's all right. It's not like a badge of honor that I want to have.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So today we're talking about positive mindset. You're an expert in this. I know, personally. I think we all have the gremlins, right? The head trash, whatever you want to call it, that gets in the way.
Yeah. Mind chatter.
Yeah, and I know some people. There's if it leads to depression, and I don't want to make this light, but you can get the vegetative depression or the hyperactive depression and all that different stuff, right?
Yes.
That's kind of when it gets far down the road. I mean, I'll put my hand up. I've dealt with depression over my life. I think
Me too.
Right?
Yep.
And so, walk us through. When we talk about taking control of your saboteurs, I think maybe the first thing we need to do is, can we define what saboteurs are when it comes to kind of positive intelligence?
Certainly. The first thing that comes to mind, the best way to explain it is that we have 2 parts of our brain. We have our survivor brain, and we have the executive part of our brain where we thrive, and our survivor brains where we survive. And that's where our saboteurs lie. And in positive intelligence, Shirzad Chamine, basically he defines that we all have master saboteur called the judge. And the judge has 9 accomplice saboteurs that utilizes. And when I work with clients, I really spend more time on looking at how is that master judge showing up. And the accomplice saboteurs are like, an example of accomplice saboteur the judge might use is an avoider, or the victim, or the hyperachiever, or the hyper rational. There's several of them, and they're all pretty basically easy to identify. The stickler. And so there's all these saboteurs we have, and that creates the mind chatter in our head. We hear these voices, as you mentioned earlier, going off in our head. But the judge is the master saboteur in the PQ operating system with the other accomplice saboteurs, and they play with us every day in very obvious ways and very subtle ways. Because if you look at it, our brain is wired to go negative. And so they love to keep us in that space of survive versus thrive. And that's where they start, is the saboteurs want to control that mind chatter to be net negative. Sure. Versus they don't want you to start having any net positive mind chatter.
it's the old expression, right? In absence of information, people will make it up, and they never make up the scenario to be really good and fun and positive, right? They always go to worst case scenarios.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at, there's different mixes out there, but, and I'm no neuroscientist, but but I love reading about neuroscience stuff. And we are our brain. We have this thing on our head, and we like to think that it doesn't do anything for us, but it's our internal operating system. And we
Right.
spend a lot of time as business owners on external operating systems, our business operating systems, but we don't take much time to look at our internal operating system and how how we're showing up and how it's working for us.
So that's a cool way to describe it, the internal operating system. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to go back, and I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball, but you said there are seven accomplices to the judge, and I'm sure there are people that are thinking, well, you threw a few out of those, and some of them sounded like it could be me. So can we just take like a minute here, and could you kind of tell us what they are, and maybe just a brief overview, like a 10-second overview of each one? So I know I'm wondering what they are, and I'm sure there's like, oh, I want to know what they are. I want to know if any of them resonate with me.
Yeah, there's actually nine. And so, like, I'll throw out the avoider. The avoider saboteur is pretty obvious. They want to keep you in avoidance. Hence the word. They want you to avoid working on that project or having that conversation with your, business, if you have another business owner or on your team. They want you to avoid. They want to keep you in that avoidance. The judge uses that. The controller saboteur. The judge uses that saboteur to make you feel like you constantly have to control things. So therefore, well, I can't delegate something. I got to keep in control. Or I need to really be involved in every level of decision. I've listened to some of the other podcast episodes that you guys have had, and I hear a lot of reference about, being, and I see it with the business owners I work with, so in the weeds. Well, that's part of that controller saboteur being used by the judge to say, no, you've got to stay in the weeds.
That sounds like the micromanager to me.
It can be. A micromanager definitely has a strong saboteur, accomplice saboteur, the controller. And that's why I said has, because you are not a controller. You are not an avoider. You are not the saboteur. In the PQ operating system, you have those saboteurs that show up in various ways during your day. And in a week, I can see all 9 saboteurs show up based on what I'm working on that the judge is using. But the judge is the master saboteur. The judge is the one that wants to make you feel shame, guilt, feel like you should, keep driving and driving and driving, and the hyperachiever is a saboteur that uses, and hyperachiever is one of my highest ones that I have. And it's hyper because being an achiever is a strength.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing to want to.
However, with all the saboteurs, they all have strengths, but a strength taken too far or overused then becomes something that's working more against you. So as a hyperachiever, it's basically, I can keep going, I can keep, achieving, and, I'll be happy when I get this next thing accomplished or this next, accolade, etc. And then you just get stressed and burned out. Hyper rational, they're basically really focused, just as it sounds, on rationalizing everything too much. Hence hyper rational. Right. It's an overdrive. It's good to have, be rational, but when a strength taken too far becomes hyper rational. Hyper vigilant is somebody that's just always on guard. Think about those people in your life who are just like, over vigilant about threats that might come or dangers, etc. The pleaser, that's another one that I have that's pretty high. And you just constantly want to, please people and go above and aboard for them at the sacrifices of your own detriment. Restless is a saboteur where you're starting on best way to describe the restless is it can show up as being, feeling like you always got to keep going. And you may start something and like, okay, well, that's getting a little boring now. I want to go to this, so that restlessness. I grew up on a dairy farm in southeast Nebraska. And when I saw how Shazad explained the restless, I thought half the time I go up to my mom and say, I'm bored. And I was never bored on the farm because we always had to be working. But there was moments where you didn't have a lot of, you didn't have a friend down the block you could just run down to. So
Right.
I would sometimes feel restless. It's like, okay, because you had to create your own, energy, your own things to do at times,
Right.
et cetera, growing up on a farm. And then I mentioned the victim, and that's just the victim saboteur is always looking at like, oh gosh, for example, victim saboteur showed up when I got COVID the third time.
Sure.
Why am I keep getting COVID?
Right.
I'm very careful. I work out of my home, et cetera. So that victim saboteur, but we have all of them. And there's actually a saboteur assessment that I think we're going to share in the links somewhere that, or people can get in touch with me and take the saboteur assessment to see how they're showing up for you.
And let's just, Matt, do we have that link for the assessment so we can flash it at the end? If not, I'm sure he's frantically Googling right now. But it's funny when you said the restless.
See, now his saboteurs are going off. Sorry to interrupt.
So when you said restless, I'm always trying. My wife is always accusing me of starting projects and never finishing them. Mm-hmm. And I've been for 20 something years now trying to convince her that I'm the starter and she's the finisher. She's the closer. I get it started and she finishes it. It hasn't worked very well, Jane.
Yeah. Well, and probably a little bit of avoider saboteurs being used there by the judge, et cetera. But it's
well, as you're going through them, I'm like, check.
Yeah. See, yeah. And yeah, it's just one of the things that I work with people on mindset is noticing is just noticing, just step back and noticing what's showing up for you. Becoming aware is one of the first steps of any operating systems. Becoming aware of how are those thoughts working for you versus against you.
And that's a great segue into kind of there it is. Attaboy, Matt. So that's a good segue into our second question, which is, what are the mistakes a business owner might make? And, you've outlined the saboteurs and we kind of know that. So maybe let's maybe talk about the mistakes they might say when they say, I'm going to change my mindset. I'm going to change the way I think about things. What are some of the common mistakes or pitfalls a business owner, because we know business owners carry a big burden, right? They've created this business to create wealth and success, not only for themselves, but to enable themselves and their employees and the families of those employees and even the community, right? They want to enrich all of those areas of their community. And, when we talk to them, a lot of times we often hear like, man, the stress of, or the pressure of knowing that the paycheck I give to people is keeping food on their families' tables is, if it's not the main driver, it's probably in the top 5 or 10 for most small business owners. Yes, and so if they're listening and saying, "Oh man, I'm checking a lot of boxes here, but I'm just going to do this on my own." What are some of those mistakes or pitfalls they might make when they try to kind of create some positive intelligence or correct their own, as you call it, internal operating system?
Well, what tends to happen is we tend to have like 50 to 80,000 negative, thoughts a day. And of those thoughts, they say that 80 to some percent is in a net negative bucket. And and 95% of them, some studies show that we tend to have the same ones ruminate over
Right.
and over during the week. And I think in the business owners I work with, I think what happens is they start making that shift towards more of a forward focused, net positive thinking, feeling, executing, the behavior that will move them forward. But what happens after a while is that survivor brain, we have it for a reason, and when it's not getting fed, it tries, it wants to be utilized, because so and it's been with us for a very long time. We've operated that way because we do tend to, as humans, lean more on the net negative side of things, and so it wants to draw us back in. And so I think when business owners feel like the stress is coming in, they go to what's comfortable for them. We go to our comfort zone. And I know this. I know I've been successful, even though it's been stressful. I know this way of operating, and I've had some success, or I've had great success. However, as I'm trying to shift my habits to being, more net positive in my approach to how I show up, if for some reason you start not feeling like it's showing enough proof in your brain,
Right.
it wants to go back to the default of the survivor brain. And we actually are just trying, with the positive intelligence operating system, what we're trying to do is build new neural pathways, because we have these strong pathways towards the survivor brain and such. But through the operating system, which one part of the operating system is intercepting your saboteurs, including the master saboteur, name it to tame it, see that they're showing up. The second part of the operating system is building that self-command muscle, and through what Shirzad calls PQ reps. And they're forms of meditation, but they're eyes open, eyes closed. They can be done moving. They can be, standing up, sitting down. There's all different forms of it. And then the other part of the operating system is utilizing and switching to that executive, what Shirzad calls your PQ sage brain, is you want to build your sage powers and your sage perspective. And that's the part of the operating system. And so I think, back to your question, I just think it's what I've seen with business owners is it's too easy to go back to what's comfortable and what they know. And it's also that fear of success or fear of failure is when people try to go out on their own, that occurs. But people, read books, they go to workshops, they listen to podcasts like this. And one of the things is partly what we're trying to do with the operating system is build your mental muscles. Just like you go to the gym to build those physical muscles, you want to build those mental muscles because they're not as strong as they need to be to move to that forward focus sage part of your brain. And it's just it's getting out of that comfort zone for people.
And as you're talking, it kind of, I think it's that fear of, well, this way of doing things got me where I am.
Yes,
And
definitely.
if I change that, am I going to lose my success? But a lot of times, yes, it got you where you are, but it could be the constraint or the limitation that's keeping you from moving to the next phase too.
Yeah,
I created this concept called that a lot of business owners are in love with the chaos of their business and not with their product, right?
Yeah.
They don't, what they value is how hard they have to work to produce their product or service versus loving the quality and the timeliness and the OTD, the on-time delivery of their service or product. And often, if you bring in someone like you or a professional, someone who's trained in lean, and they say, man, we can make this really easy for you sometimes they resist that because they go, well, if it's too easy, I can't charge as much because we can't say we had to work hard. And
Yes.
it's kind of misplaced, right? Because people aren't buying how hard you work. They don't care. They just care
Yes.
that you got them the right product or the service to their
Yes.
job site or wherever on the time you said you were going to be, and it was a high quality product and they could trust it wasn't going to break down, or the service you provided fixed what they needed fixed on time.
Yes.
And because you can do that, they'll kind of almost pay you whatever you want if you're the person that can deliver that. And
Yes.
they really don't care that you had to take 3 planes and rent 4 cars and haven't slept in 48 hours to do that.
Yeah.
They just care that their equipment's up and running and we can get back to generating revenue.
Yeah, exactly. And when you shared that story, you had shared that story on a previous podcast. And when I was listening to it, I thought so much about how that particular business, how much their judge and the accomplice saboteurs were showing up and blocking them from making a decision that could be more ease and flow and even more profitable for them than they are now.
Yeah.
But their belief system, because our brain, and how we function is really, we have these beliefs, and then we have these feelings and these emotions, and then that forms our thoughts, then that forms our actions.
Right.
And when I was listening to that particular podcast that you did, I just thought how that person, how that company is working so much on an old operating system and not open to seeing what's possible with a new internal operating system that they could develop and actually have more ease and flow.
Sure.
And probably be more than likely, I would bet I would bet money on it that they would be even more profitable and make more money than they're
And they would
making
have,
now.
but beyond that, they would have happier employees who
Yeah.
would be working more regular hours. There would be more stability in the business.
Yeah.
Productivity would go up. Their
Oh, definitely.
their injuries and workers' comp would go down because people are well rested.